All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Katie Kosis. I am the Director of Financial Aid here at Niagara University. Tonight, we are going to go over the FAFSA process and financial aid offers and that process. So if you have any questions as we go through, just pop them in the chat and we will get them either as we go or at the very end. But yeah, and if any questions, anything that I don't address, please feel free to ask those as well. To share my PowerPoint, so just hang on one second. So my contact information is on the screen. That is our main financial aid number. If you need to call anyone in our office, we'll take you to the main line, and my team can help you with that. And then my email is if you have any questions you want to ask me after this. It's on the screen as well, and I think I have it again at the very end. So the FAFSA. Now, if you are a senior right now in high school or a parent of a senior, this is going to apply to you for right now, this very minute. If you are a parent of a junior, this is something you'll be thinking about for next year, but maybe you're just trying to get a head start and kind of an overview process of it. But for any financial aid above and beyond a merit scholarship, which would typically come from the admissions office and be based upon, high school GPA or SATs or SAT scores, whichever they might be taking. Above and beyond that, any other financial aid is really going to be derived from the FAFSA form. So you do need to complete one. If you are a current senior right now, it did open up October 1st. So it is out there, it's available for you. So if you haven't yet done so, please go ahead and fill that out, and we'll go through that process now. But in order to actually fill out the FAFSA, you do need to apply for an FSA ID, if I could talk. And you need one for the student and one for at least one parent. Now, both parents don't need one. Only one parent has to sign off on the FAFSA, but the student needs their own and a parent needs their own. You cannot use the same email addresses for creating your FSA IDs. So you do need to have separate ones to match up with the student and the parent. And you can go to studentaid.gov/FSA-ID to sign up for an FSA ID. Now, if you're a junior, you can do this now and it'll just, you have it forever. Or again, if you're a senior right now, you can go ahead and do that before you complete the FAFSA form. So after you have the FSA ID, you're going to go ahead and complete the FAFSA form. Please be very careful about what year you are completing. Right now, there are technically 2 years of the FAFSA out there. There's the current year that we're in academically, the 22-23 year. And then there's the year that you as a senior will be entering college, the 23-24 academic year for next fall. That is the one you will need to fill out. Already, we unfortunately have seen students and families, fill out the wrong one. So make sure that you are, going ahead and completing the right year. So what we're going to go over is the worksheet version. It's really just a guide. You don't actually fill anything out on paper. Everything is going to be done online. But this just gives you a good guide of the information you'll need to gather before you actually do the FAFSA. It is the student's FAFSA. It is their federal application for student aid. It is in their name, but they will most likely need parental information on the FAFSA. So when you go sit down to complete it, you're filling it out as a student. I mean, hopefully you're filling it out together, but it is the student's information. So their name, social security number, date of birth, whether they're a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, like a permanent resident. If we have any international students on the line right now, unfortunately, you would not be eligible to file the FAFSA form. It is a U.S. or eligible non-citizen based aid. And so they would fill out this basic information. Ask some information about, parent 1 and parent 2, what the highest school they completed. This is to determine whether or not a student will be considered a first generation student. And this means that are they the first ones in their family to go on to higher education, or are they, someone else, parents or grandparents have already, gone to a college or higher education of some sort. So this is really just for informational purposes only. Sometimes some grants and scholarships are based upon this type of information. So that's why they're asking those questions. It will then start going into students' dependency status. And this is trying to determine whether or not a student will have to provide that parental information. Now, 9 times out of 10, coming out of high school, students will have to complete that or will have to provide parental information. But if they can say yes to any one of these questions that are listed here, then they would be considered independent and not have to report parental information. If they were born before January 1st, 2000, if they're currently married, they're in the armed forces, if they have children on their own that they support more than 50%, if they're in legal guardianship, if they're at risk of being homeless. So any one of those things, if they can say yes to that, then they would be considered independent and not have to provide parental information. Just a note, though, that a lot of times students will fill this out incorrectly. And so, schools will probably contact students to make sure that this was completed correctly, and they'll have to update it and then provide parental information. And sometimes in the case of like legal guardianship, we will need actual court documentation for that. Legal guardianship is different than legal custody in New York State. So if it says custody, it's not the same thing. It has to say legal guardianship to count for this. So there's a lot of, different varieties of things that this could fall into. So if the student is able to say yes to one of these things, just have them, follow up with the schools, or most likely the schools will follow up with them for clarification. But 9 times out of 10, coming out of high school, students will have to report parental information. And if that's the case, they need, as a family, you need to figure out which parent or parents' information you need to report. So if your parents are married or you're unmarried, but living together, you would report both information. This is bio parents. If the parents are divorced, then currently you have to report with whoever the student lives with more than 50% of the year of the time during the prior 12 months. Now, if for some reason it happens to be 50-50, even though there's 365 days in the year, if maybe, court documentation says it's 50-50 or whatnot, then you would go with whoever provided more than 50% of the financial support during the prior year. And that would include things like being on a parent's health insurance, that would count as financial support. So that's up to you as a family to figure out which parents to report if it is a divorce situation. If it is a divorce situation, another thing to keep in mind is that if the parents are remarried, so let's say student lives with, parent one and parent, is remarried and now they're step parent, you have to report both of their information as well. So step parents' information would be reported if the student lives with that side of the parents, during the previous 12 months. Okay. Which parents to report on the FAFSA. You're going to go ahead and put in their information. So that will be, their social security number, their date of birth, first name, last name, those types of things. And then it'll start asking questions about income. So it will ask if the parents filed any income taxes for the 2021 year. If they, if you did complete taxes for that year, it will also then ask you, which we'll get to in one more slide, but it'll ask you about the data retrieval tool. We encourage you to say yes for this. It will actually put the information from the IRS that's already on file into the FAFSA form. So it is an option that you will see presented. Again, this is all online, that you will see that. If you are either unable to use the data retrieval tool or maybe didn't file, but you had some earnings, you would still have to then complete this manually for those specific sections when it's asking about, wages earned and whatnot. Besides the adjusted gross income, of course, it'll say, parent one for earnings, parent two for earnings. You'd go off of W-2 forms or maybe Schedule 1, whichever you might have, depending upon what taxes you have. So again, a lot of this will come over from the data retrieval tool if you use it, but if not, you will have to manually enter it. It will also ask if in the year 21 or the current year of 22, if anyone in the household received Medicaid, SSI, free reduced lunch, SNAP benefits, anything like that. You would, check that off. And then some additional questions of, did you pay any child support? Did you receive any child support? Did you put any money towards your 401k plans during the year? That's from your W-2 forms. So there's a lot of extra questions on here that you may or may not have to respond to. It might not apply to you, and that's okay. There's a lot of skip logic involved in the FAFSA. So again, you might not be presented with every single question, but these are the main things that would be asked. Now, based upon how you have answered the questions, again, based upon what your AGI is and if you had earnings and all that stuff, you may be asked to provide asset information. Now, if you are asked about assets, again, not everyone will be, but if you are, these are the things you would have to report. So the total amount of cash, savings, and checking accounts as of the day you're filing the FAFSA. So even though tax information is based off of 2021, when you're asked about assets, it's as of the day you're filing the FAFSA. So as of the day you're filing the FAFSA, how much is in your cash, savings, and checking accounts as parents, net worth of other investments, and then also if you have a business or investment firm. Net worth, of course, means the current value as of today, minus any debts related to those investments or businesses. I always get questions on the investment. So I wanted to go in a little bit more deeper into what this is exactly, so you have hopefully a better idea. Investments include real estate, but not the house you live in. So if you have like a vacation home or a rental property, those things would have to count as being reported as an investment. Trust funds, money market accounts, mutual funds, CDs, stocks, bonds. Now, it is not asking, which we'll get to in this next slide, it is not asking about the value of your retirement funds, but any other type of stocks and bonds that you would own outside of that. Investments also include qualified education benefits like 529 savings plans, anything like a prepaid type of thing for educational purposes. Now, another question I get asked a lot about the 529 plans is, well, where do they go under? So if a student who has to report parental information, so they're considered a dependent student, if the accounts are owned by the student, or the parents, they're reported as parental investments under the asset questions. So including all accounts owned by the student and all accounts owned by the parents for any other members in the household. That's where that would go. Now, if the account is owned by the 529, it's owned by like a grandparent, then that would not be reflected on the FAFSA because it's not owned by the student. Do not include, you don't include the home you live in, the value of life insurance, ABLE accounts, retirement plans. We don't, again, no retirement plans, non-education IRAs, anything like that. And they also don't include the UGMA or UTMA for which you are the custodian, but not the owner. And I know some of that's gonna be very specific to maybe a very specific handful of families, but I just wanted to put it out there because it is one of the main questions I get asked when I'm talking about the investment section. And the business part for investments as well, it depends on how big your business is. So you don't include the value of a small business if your family owns and controls more than 50%. And you also have 100 or fewer full-time employees. So there is that cutoff. So that's important to note because you might not have to report the net worth if you fall into that category. So now after you put in all the parental information for income and assets, it will then switch over to the student side of the house. And it's going to be all the same questions you just answered as for the parent, but now just asking, from the student's perspective. So if the student filed taxes, now they may or may not have, they're in high school, it is 2 years prior technically. So they might not have had any taxes, but if they did, same thing, answer yes, try to use the data retrieval tool. If not, then you would, put stuff in manually. What was their just gross income? What were their earnings? Did they have any of these, SNAP or free reduced lunch? If they said yes, no. So all the same questions, just now from the student's perspective. Same thing, they'll be asked for these items as well. But most times, again, coming out of high school, students won't be able to answer yes to any of these things or have anything to put in there. But, maybe if they're an independent student, they might have something like this. And again, they might also be asked for assets. If you were asked for assets, most likely they'll be asked for asset questions as well. So now what you're going to do is you will hopefully have all that information prepared, kind of get it ready ahead of time, have it ready to go, have your 2021 taxes, have your W-2 forms, all that fun stuff, your bank statements ready to go as you sit down and do it. Again, it's going to be online. You're going to go to studentaid.gov to actually complete the FAFSA form. You will use your FSA ID. I should say the student is using their FSA ID to log into the form. And it will go to the section. You say you're the student or the parent, whichever one it is. But the student will still need to log in using their FSA ID because it is their FAFSA form. And they will start the process. And it will go through each of those sections that we just went over. When you get to the income section, as I said before, it will offer you the chance to use the data retrieval tool. This opened up October 1st, just like when the FAFSA opened up, and it allows you to take the information that's already on file with the IRS for your 2021 taxes and put it into the FAFSA form. We highly recommend using the data retrieval tool when using the FAFSA or completing the FAFSA because it provides for or allows us to have accurate information on the FAFSA form instead of having, some people guess when they put in income information. Sometimes extra zero is put in there if you do it manually. which you don't want, of course. I will say if you use the data retrieval tool, it's important to note that you as the user on your end won't be able to see the information that's being transferred over. It'll tell you what lines transferred over, but it won't show you the numbers. And that's just for security purposes. Just know that when it gets processed and goes to all the different schools you're putting on there, we can see it and it does transfer the information over correctly. Also, when you're in the FAFSA, it will also ask you the number in household and the number in college. You do not report any parents in college. You just report students, the siblings, the student and maybe a sister or brother that's going to college is being in college at the time of the academic year that's upcoming. Now, you will also, at the end, you will put in all your email contact information, and after it processes, it will send a SAR report, a student aid report, to the email addresses on file. And it's really just a summary of all the questions on the FAFSA and how you answered everything. I highly recommend reviewing this to make sure it's correct. Again, especially if you're entering in any numbers or information, extra zeros happen. We see it all too often, unfortunately. So, and don't use decimal points. Don't try to put in like 5,000.00. That it doesn't like decimal, so it will then show up as like 50,000. We don't want that. So make sure that everything is correct. You can go back and change it. That's not a problem. That's why they give you the SAR report, to make sure you can do that. And just go back into the online application after it processes and then make a correction. But on the student aid report, it will again list everything you provided. It will give you your EFC. You'll see that number here, the EFC, expected family contribution. We'll get to the number in a little bit, but it will tell you what it is, and this is 0. If you see a little asterisk next to EFC, that means the student has been selected for the verification process. This is a process where the government, randomly, it says random, it's an algorithm that they have. As a student, I was selected every single year, so it is what it is. And this is where you as the family will have to provide additional documentation to the schools so that they can verify all the information on the FAFSA is correct. The number of students who are selected for verification has really decreased over the years. It used to be about 30%. It's gone down now to more about I think at Niagara, we're probably around 11-12%. So it's really gone down over the years. But just know this might be a possibility that you get selected and we'll have to provide additional documentation to the schools. Also on this, if you see a C code, that's not great. That means that there's something typically wrong. Something's not matching. Something somewhere is not connecting. The schools will reach out and request typically additional documentation. Maybe it's a social security issue, a citizenship issue, something like that. Just know that that's if you see a C code, you will have to provide additional documentation somewhere. In the FAFSA form, you can list it to 10 schools for it to go to the different financial aid offices of those schools. So you can only do 10 at a time. So if you do need to do more than 10, what you have to do, put your top 10 schools, let it process through, give it about a week, then go back in, take some schools off and put some other schools on. This is totally fine to do, but just make sure you're keeping track of which ones you're taking off and which ones you're putting on. Because if you end up taking off one and then going to that school, they're not getting any more updates. So it's really important that you do keep track of, if you're taking any on and off. Each school will receive the FAFSA electronically with about 3 to 5 business days. Really just depends on the volume and if it's before a weekend and processing time, but usually about 3 days is when we do see the FAFSAs come in. And then the schools will start to put together the financial aid offers for you. And you'll see a range of when these award letters go out. Some might be going out this month in December. From Niagara, we start in January, and others might be February, March. Each school is different. You should definitely contact each of the schools you're looking into if you have any questions on their timelines. Now that we kind of got through the FAFSA part of it, I'm going to go into some more of the different acronyms and things you will see throughout the financial aid process when you start getting your offer letters. So the first thing I want to go over is the cost of attendance. And the cost of attendance is comprised of 2 different components. You have your direct cost and you have your indirect cost. Your direct cost are things like tuition, fees, room and board if you're living on campus, maybe books and supplies, things that are going to be charged directly on your bill. And the indirect costs are things that are part of your budget. We know you're going to encounter throughout the year. Books and supplies, potentially if they're not charged directly, room and board if you're not living on campus, transportation, personal costs, those types of things that you won't see on your bill, but they are part of, expenses you will see through, you'll encounter throughout the academic year. So both of those things combine to create your cost of attendance. And this is going to vary widely from school to school because each school has different costs. The cost of NTRIP versus NU versus Harvard are very different, of course. So this is something that will be different for each school you're applying to. Can be different for if you decide to be a commuter versus living on campus. Those are different budgets. So just things to keep in mind. You then have your expected family contribution, which is what we talked about a little bit ago, the EFC. And this is derived from, the FAFSA, filling out all the FAFSA information, goes through the federal processor, and it spits out the EFC number. Now, technically, it is the amount a family can reasonably be expected to contribute towards the college education. It does stay the same regardless of college or where you're going to, the parent contribution, the student contribution, and it is calculated using the federal formula. But it's not, it's not going to translate directly into what you're going to owe. You might have a 0 EFC from the FAFSA, but does not mean you are going to owe $0 at the schools you're applying to as a remaining balance. Some schools, sure, totally possible depending upon the school you're going to, but more so with private schools, you are going to most likely have a balance rather than not having anything. And same thing, if your EFC is like 50,000, does that mean you're going to owe $50,000 to each school that you go to? It's really just a standard way for schools to be able to put together offers or financial aid offers to students on a standard manner. You have your EFC. You take your cost of attendance minus your financial contribution from the FAFSA form, and that remaining number is your financial need. And this means schools can offer you need-based aid up to that amount. Again, it's going to be different for each student because each student has a different budget and a different EFC. So it's really hard to compare one student to another because everyone's so different based upon their individual situations. But that is the calculation that schools use to determine what a student's financial need is. Start to receive your financial aid offers. They're going to have 4 different main categories of aid you will see. You're going to have your scholarships. These are more things like maybe merit scholarships that come from the admissions office based upon what you've done in high school or maybe at a previous college, things that are more merit-based. Then you have your grants. These are going to be more so maybe need-based grants like a Pell Grant, a TAP grant from New York State, need-based grants from the university, those types of things. Scholarships and grants, free money, don't have to pay those back. You always want to accept those, of course. You then get into what we call self-help aid, which would be loans. So it'll be federal loans, most likely in the student's name. They will have to pay that back after graduation. Maybe private loans if you decide to take out private loans in the student's name, maybe Parent Plus loans, which are federal loans but in the parent's name. But loans, you have to pay those back after graduation or after a student stops attending. And the next one is employment. So this could be maybe a work study job that's offered, or maybe some other type of employment on campus. So things where, you have to work in order to earn the money to then use that for personal expenses or to help pay off your balance, whatever it might be. But the first 2, grants, scholarships, free money, loans you have to pay back, and employment you're working for in order to earn that. So those are the 4 main categories that your financial offers will have. Sources of these financial aid is the main one is federal government. That's based upon your FAFSA form. They are the largest source. The next one is states. If you're a New York State resident attending a New York State school, you might be eligible for some New York aid money. We'll get to that in a little bit in a couple slides. I will say though, if you are thinking of going to a school outside of New York State, that money does not travel with you. You cannot use the TAP grant, tuition assistance program through New York State at a school outside of New York State. Sometimes people thought that they could, but that is not something that the state allows you to do. Colleges and universities themselves, whether it's merit scholarships, need-based grants, maybe resident grants, whatever they might have, they're offering to you. Private sources, these are things that would not come from, of course, the federal, the state, the universities. These are things you're looking for on your own, whether it is maybe like the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo or Rochester or Syracuse, they all have one. American Legions, you work at a Wegmans, all these places have different type of scholarships that students can apply for, but they're applying for them on their own. It is their responsibility to go out and do that, but the money then could go to the school to help pay for their balance. And then, of course, civic organizations and churches and employers are all kind of part of those private sources. Government, I did mention, largest source of financial aid. Most of the aid that they have is awarded on having some type of financial need. but whether it's based upon your financial contribution from the FAFSA or the need calculation, typically majority of the money coming from the federal government is going to be based upon having some type of financial need. You do have to apply every year through the FAFSA form. It is an annual process. So every October 1st, it will be open for you to complete for the next academic year. For incoming students, I recommend having it in, normally I say like by Thanksgiving, but we're past Thanksgiving. So if you could have it in by the end of the year, that'd be great. For returning students, once you, become a sophomore moving on, you don't have to do it, October 1st when it opens. But again, if you have it in by the end of the year, then that would be helpful in us being able to get your package going for the next year. Common federal programs you're going to see, the aid programs and the financial aid offer letters. The federal Pell Grant, right now, this is currently based off of whatever your EFC is. So if your EFC is about, I think it's about like 6,000 or below, you would be eligible for some amount of the Pell Grant. There's a range based upon what your EFC is. There's the Teach Grant if you're thinking of going into the education field, the Opportunity Grant, federal work study, like I mentioned before, you typically work on campus. And then you get into your loans, your subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Loans are considered financial aid. They will be offered to you. Then you can either decide to accept or reject those loans. The subsidized and unsubsidized are in the student's name, as the FAFSA is their application for all things financial aid federally. Again, yeah, sub and unsub in the students' names. The subsidized is considered need-based. So this is when the government actually pays the interest on the loan while they're in school. The unsubsidized, they don't. It is accruing. So together, the maximum amount of sub and unsub for a freshman is $5,500 for the year. So there are caps on the loan limits. And then plus loans, which I mentioned briefly before, these are parent plus loans. They are federal loans in the parent's name, but again, it will be in the parent's name. You can never transfer it over to the student, but it is one option some parents go with to help pay the balance. Programs, states. So again, if you are a New York State resident attending New York State school, you can look into applying for the TAP program. There's the Excelsior program if you're looking at going to a state school. There's some merit-based programs there too through New York State. So highly recommend you apply for this. It is technically a separate application from the FAFSA form. Now, when you're in the FAFSA form, at the very end, after you hit submit, it will ask you, do you want to transfer your information over to your state application? If you say yes, it will take majority of what you've already filled out and pop it into the state application. There's some additional things you have to fill out, but it does a lot of the work for you. If you don't do it at that time, that's okay, but you'll have to go back directly to the HESC website, hesc.ny.gov, to actually complete the form separately. You have to wait about a week for the FAFSA process before you'll be able to go and fill out your state application, as it does take time for the information to transfer over after the fact. I kind of mentioned this earlier really quickly, but foundations, businesses, I suggest these are going to start opening up in the next month or two for applications for the fall 23 semester. So it's really important for students to really start looking for these. Apply. Yes, there's national things, scholarships.com, FAFSA.com. Those are good resources for the national sites, but just know that you're kind of competing with everybody in the nation for those. I highly encourage looking for as many local scholarships as you can. Whatever your local area is, contact your high school guidance counselors. I know a lot of local schools have scholarships that are specific to the school districts. Again, Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo and other ones like that are really good resources. Look for those things. Every little bit helps, whether it's 500, 5,000. 500 helps with books. So that's something to really look into. Start making sure that you are doing that now, as applications for private sources will start opening up and typically have March, April deadlines. A couple more things I wanted to mention before we get to questions. So when you are filling out the FAFSA form, you do have to use the 2021, for the 23-24 year, you're using the 2021 tax information. You have to use that. But we know it's been a couple crazy years. So if something has happened, whether there has been a reduction in income, a loss of a job completely, a divorce or separation, something like that, those things happen. You would then contact the schools, that you're truly interested in, and explain to them the circumstances, and they will let you know what their process is. They will let you know if they are able to take it as what we call professional judgment or special circumstances. We'll ask you for, you will have to provide documentation. We get audited as well, so we need to have this as backup. You will be asked to provide, current pay stubs or unemployment benefits or something like that, to show that we will see if we on our end are able to reduce anything on the FAFSA, and thereby hopefully reducing your financial contribution, which in theory would then increase the financial aid that you might be eligible for, like Pell Grants or something like that. New York State does not accept these changes. It'd only be any federal aid and maybe institutional aid. You cannot change state information for reduction in income. They're kind of sticklers for their type of special circumstances. So if it's something where it's like a change in situation or income, contact the schools. They'll explain their process to you, and then you can go ahead with that process. But sometimes the case is that nothing really has changed, but you get your financial aid offer and you're just looking at it and you know that you are going to need some additional funding in order to be able to go to that school, or you're getting other, you're comparing to other schools and, you're saying maybe one's a little less expensive or whatever the case might be. That's okay. You can contact the schools again that you're applying to, and just write, again, they'll explain the process. At Niagara, you just write an email or a letter, an appeal letter explaining what's going on. And we have an appeals committee that meets, to go over those things to see if there's anything additional that we can do. So again, but each school might have their own different process. Do highly recommend, we can email this out, I'm pretty sure, our booklet, but also, even if you don't use this one, please do something like this. Once you start getting all your financial aid offers in the mail or online, each school again might be different how they deliver those. Really take the time to lay everything out. Okay, school A, what are their tuition? What are their fees? Am I living on campus? Am I living at home? Am I commuting? Am I in a program that has additional fees attached to that? Like at Niagara, our business and nursing and theater, and I'm missing one, I'm sure, but they have additional program fees. So, you got to make sure that you're including all those as part of your cost. Then, did you get Pell Grant? Did you get a state grant, need-based grants? Really go down the line so that you can get to the end and really see what it is, apples to apples. This will, one, help you as a family figure out like what your best scenario is. It will help you maybe in the appeals process if you're comparing one school to another. And it really helps you just kind of be focused on this and making a good decision for the next, 2-4 years that students will be attending school. A lot of times in the appeal process that we will get people comparing things, but it'll say, oh, well, this other school gave me like $40,000, but they cost $70,000, and so you have that $30,000 gap where maybe you only have a $10,000 gap with us, but it doesn't seem as much because you're just looking at the financial aid that you were awarded and not the whole picture. So it's really important that you do this in whatever manner you have, but it's a good idea to do once you start receiving all those financial aid offer letters. A lot of information, I get it. It's also, if you are from Buffalo, West New York area, I know the bills are on soon, so I know we got to get going for that. But if you have any, we'll go through the questions that we have here. But if you do have anything, after this, again, my contact information, either my email, kkosis@niagara.edu, or FAO, that's our general one, at niagara.edu, that's always monitored, and sometimes gets back to people quicker than I can. So either one of those two, give us a call. We have online appointments to help you either fill out the FAFSA. You can, if you want to discuss just stuff in general, you can come in, give us a call, or online. There's a lot of options that we have. So we are here to help. But Erin, do we have any questions of things that I probably flew through by?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
The most important one being, can they get a PowerPoint of the meeting? If you send it to me, I can email it out to all the families if that's all right.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay, yes, we can definitely get the PowerPoint sent to everyone for reference when you're filing the FAFSA. But we do offer consultations. Katie is great if you do need help filing it. Feel free to reach out to Katie directly, or you can sign up on our website. The next question is, does a parent need a new FSA ID for each child in college?
Good question. No. So each student will have their own FSA ID, but as the parent, if you already have one or you're creating one for, one, that is yours, and you will use that for every single student that you're signing off on their FAFSA form.
Perfect. And then does the SAR get emailed right away after you finish the FAFSA? And then can parents get a copy or just the students?
Great questions. I believe it has to process first. I don't think it's immediate. I think it's within a couple of days. I believe it has to go through the process first to run all their checks, because they can't always do the social security checks, as instantaneously. So I believe it is emailed out after a couple of days after it has been processed. Like the student will get an email saying, "Oh, your financial aid has been processed. Please click here to review your SAR report." And as far as the email question, I have gotten this a couple times, and I still don't. I need to look into it more. I know the student, both emails, a parent email and a student email, are on the FAFSA. But as far as where the SAR report goes to, I think it's just the student, but I'm not 100% on that. So if the student has, put their email in, have them forward whatever they received to you.
Next question. When you Google Niagara University costs, an annual number comes up with your family income bracket. Is this a reliable number?
I don't know which one they're referring to. What I would do is, because everyone's so different, each school has a net price calculator that you can use. Right now our information is based upon last year's information, but it would give you a pretty similar margin of where you think you might end up. So I highly recommend using the net price calculator. Again, it does have it has old information as far as like tuition numbers, because we just came out with the tuition numbers for 23-24. But at least it'll give you a rough idea. And also we're just starting to work on financial aid pack offers. We're finalizing the setting up of our system to be able to do that. But if you want, what I'll call like an early read or something, feel free to email our office and we can definitely give you an estimate of what your financial aid offer would be. It'd be an early estimate, but it would be, something that we could get out to you before we start actually sending stuff out next month.
Thank you. Is the financial aid letter worksheet available online?
So this thing is in one of our workbooks that I will give to Erin, and she can send out with the PowerPoint. Is that okay, Erin? Okay, great. Yes, it will be sent out. We can send it. We can attach it.
Yeah, sounds good. And then can you repeat the site that they could use to apply for state if they did not do it with their original FAFSA?
Sure. It is HESC, so it's HESC. We can probably put it in the chat too, but hesc.ny.gov. HESC.ny.gov is where you will go directly.
The next one is the merit-based aid mentioned also need-based?
No, so the merit-based aid, at least from Niagara, and most other merit-based aid, I would assume, but from Niagara, merit-based aid has nothing to do with need. You could have $1 million and you're still going to get that merit-based scholarship or grant, because that's based upon what the student did in high school, or if they're transferring in from another college. So the merit-based scholarship has nothing to do whatsoever with need. Most other aid above and beyond that is going to be based upon the FAFSA information, though.
And then the last one, is there anything that can be done if you feel the EFC is exceptionally high?
So this might go into more of like a special circumstance type of thing. Now, in order for financial aid officers to actually adjust the EFC, there has to be some type of, like I said, a reduction in income, divorce or separation, really high medical expenses, like something like there has to be something like that we will be able to work with. If it's just because you think the EFC is just not, it's really high, but there's nothing else that has changed in the situation, there won't be really anything that the schools can do. But again, if it's because that there's actually something that happened, or something that's not the same, then yes, definitely reach out to the schools to see what they can do. Or in that case, if there's nothing has changed, it could just be a normal appeals, we'll call it, just to see if there's any additional funding, but not so much that we're able to do anything about changing the FAFSA.
All right, does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat before we all go and watch the Bills game.
Sharing my screen real quick and let me.
All right, I think we are all set. If anyone needs anything, feel free to reach out to the financial aid or the admissions office. Your counselor will be able to work with you if you have any questions. So I know I had a couple families on here that I've been working with or will be working with in the future. So don't be afraid to reach out to us. We're here to help you. Even if it's just to get started on the FAFSA, you don't understand something on your package, or offer, I should say, offer is the new term. We'd be more than happy to help explain anything that you might not understand, or work with you to file an appeal as well.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out to my office, the financial aid office. I know, you might not have questions now, but as you get into the FAFSA process, or once you get your financial aid offer and maybe you're confused on something, I get it. It's a lot of new things. It might be a new adventure for some people. So feel free to reach out to my office, myself or my team, and we'll be happy to answer and help you along the way.